Hi, everyone, and welcome to another AEC+tech Talk. These discussions are brought to you by AEC+tech platform and community committed to keeping you informed and engaged with the latest tools and technologies in the AEC space. Today, we are excited to have two accomplished experts with us who are actively exploring and integrating AI into their work processes. During this session, we'll delve into their experiences and learn about their projects and methodologies. This event will be recorded and stored on our AEC+tech YouTube channel for future references. If you have any questions for our panelists during the event, please don't hesitate to post them in the LinkedIn or YouTube chat box, and we will address them during the Q&A segment at the end. Before our two fabulous speakers' presentations, I will briefly introduce them and we'll let them share more about themselves and their work themselves. Rami is the Managing Director of Consulting at JLL, specializing in portfolio optimization, workplace strategy, CRE transformation, and workforce planning. And renowned as a thought leader and keynote speaker in the real estate industry with over 15 years of experience working with corporate occupiers, real estate developers, and public sector organizations across various industries. Thank you so much, Rami, for joining us today. Eric, an architect and expert in post-disaster reconstruction, is a noted author, educator, and designer with extensive experience in international development, economics, and design futurism, recognized for his leadership in disaster recovery programs and contribution to the fields of architecture and climate adaptation. Thanks, Eric, for being with us today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ram. Ram, please feel free to share your screen and tell us about your work and your projects.
Okay, awesome. Niknaz, just let me know once you can see my screen. I'm sharing now.
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay, awesome. So I'll take the next about, let's say 15-20 minutes on addressing what's happening in the AI space, generally speaking from a business perspective, how each one of us as individuals can benefit, individuals personally, how can we benefit from the revolution that we are seeing. And I will also touch on what's happening from a workforce perspective and then from a workplace and real perspective. I'll try and keep this brief. Eric has some great content to share, and what we'll do through this session is attempt to address as much Q&A as possible, keep this conversational as we go through it. So with that, happy to share a little bit more. Niknaz already shared a little bit of what we do at JLL within the consulting space. I lead future of work consulting for JLL, work with clients around the world on implementing future of work strategies. This includes things like what do you do with hybrid work going into the future? How do you think about the use of exponential technologies like AI, AR, VR, those kind of things in the workplace? How do you galvanize your teams to deal with all the changes that we are seeing in the work environment today? So I kind of work on all of those spaces. And for those who may or may not have heard of JLL, JLL is a good global property consulting organization. It's a Fortune 200 company. We work with clients around the world and manage and invest in real estate assets. We have about 5 billion square feet of real estate under management. And over the last decade or so, we have invested heavily in the technology space as well. In fact, Goldman Sachs recently added JLL to its AI portfolio. JLL is the only real estate stock in Goldman Sachs' AI portfolio. So that is a fantastic credential there from Goldman Sachs. We also do a lot of work in the systems integration space. Verdantix recently rated us as the top systems integrators in the workplace arena. And then through our venture capital arms, Spark and SparkX, we invest heavily in the property technology space as well. So some of our investment portfolio is on the right on this slide. And I'm happy to connect with anyone offline to share more about what JLL is doing in any of these areas. I also write extensively on the topics of AI, future of work, technology, return to the office, and all of those topics. And I also have, interestingly, a book coming out in the near future on the topic of AI and the future. and I've written that in partnership with ChatGPT. So upcoming soon. So with that kind of brief introduction, um, we thought might be good for us to kind of share what's happening in the general market space, how companies are kind of dealing with this next stage revolution, and how should we as individuals kind of think about it. So, firstly, AI has been described as civilization defining technology. And why is it that people are saying this? And by the way, full credit to folks at the Neuron. They issue a fantastic AI newsletter every day. It's written in a fun way and keeps you kind of abreast of all the topics. So I'd welcome everyone to subscribe to this newsletter. Fantastic source of insight. On the right side, you're seeing this beautiful rotating 3D graph. And all of us who have dealt with data and real estate data specifically know how painful it would have been to create something like this. What's interesting is a graph like this takes about, I don't know, a couple of weeks to develop if we are doing this the old-fashioned way, the hard way, the manual way, the Excel way. But this graph took less than 5 minutes for us to create using an AI model. And this is kind of the influence that AI is having on our work, on how we work and how workflows will change. And therefore, it's being defined as civilization defining technology. Much like the steam engine and electricity changed how we live, work, play, adapt, interact with each other, shrunk the world, and did various other things in a positive, productive fashion, AI will do the same things. And as we go through the next 12 to 24 months, these are the conversations that all of our clients are focused on. AI, emerging technologies, exponential technology is a huge area of focus for all of our clients, and we will discuss more of that today. But this particular trend is not one in isolation. It kind of, sits in unison with all the others that you're seeing on the slide here. So all of our clients are thinking about workforce transformation, the ecosystem of the workplace, home, office, virtual, and beyond. How do you ensure that hybrid work and the experimentation that continues in that space leads to productivity enhancements for your people? And of course, there is real estate optimization that comes out of it as well. Last but not the least, even leadership, empathy-based management, huge topic of interest for all of our clients. So these are 6 areas. AI emerging technologies dominates the discussion as of now, but these are 6 areas that clients are focused on. And as we are implementing with all of our clients, we are seeing the integration of all these areas: workforce, workplace, portfolio decisions across the real estate space. There is significant integration across those elements. And one of the reasons we are seeing that is because we are seeing convergence of technologies, convergence of different elements coming together to shape our future. So if you think about AI, machine learning, data, that's one area of advanced technology that's impacting how we work. There is also AR, VR. We're seeing tremendous advancements in that space. There's also robotics. We're seeing tremendous advancements in that space. We're seeing, self-driving cars. We're seeing things like smart cities, smart buildings. All of those elements coming together, and there's fantastic convergence that's happening there, and that's going to yield significant results for all of us. And this is why I believe that we live in a very unique moment. Right now, we were discussing just before this call, Niknaz, Eric, and I, and we kind of have the power of God in our hands, and we can do a lot with it. And kind of the pen is in our hands to write the future. And this is not lost on any of our clients. All of our CEO clients are right now speaking about AI. There's a fantastic piece of analysis put out by IoT Analytics, where they've looked at CEO conversations and investor calls, and you'll see that AI is kind of dominating the space here. Generative AI, and the use cases in industry is taking front and center across all of our client conversations, and you're seeing that reflected here as well. You're also seeing that it's running in parallel with other topics like economic worries, sustainability, those kind of things. And there is potential to use AI to support some of those conversations and solve for some of those issues as well. So it's a very important topic of conversation right now with all of our clients. And I also thought I'd share a little bit in terms of how IDC has predicted the future of work. And I really thought there were four key elements across the IDC forecast that was very interesting, very relevant to us in the real estate industry. I've highlighted four of them on the slide here. If you look at the first one there, around the fact that the developer role, and here they're referring to software developers, they're suggesting that 60% of enterprise would invest heavily in making business users the proponents of some of these new tools, new technologies. And how they will do that is through no code, low code applications. Applications like Rapid Miner, Data IQ, H2O driverless AI, those kind of things allow us as citizen developers. You don't need to be a programmer, machine learning expert with a basic understanding of that space, with good quality labeled data. You can create your own platforms, your own tools. So these applications, the low code, no code applications, will change how we interact with this. Also, from a real estate perspective, we are seeing the point number 8 there, intelligent workspace ecosystem. That's going to drive significant differentiated business outcomes. And this is going to be an important feature going forward. There's also 65% of companies IDC projects by 2026 will look at online presence equal to in-office presence, and that's a important emerging trend where technology will play a huge role. And then the last point there, interestingly, they say by 2024, which is literally a few months away here, companies are going to use intelligent space planning and capacity planning software. So huge trends that are shaping our space, and incumbent on all of us to kind of understand, learn, implement these trends as we go forward, these elements, as and take it and use it in our daily work. So with that kind of brief introduction, just in terms of a little bit of definition for us on this discussion, there's AI as a term is being thrown around quite a bit, and I often suggest that the only thing growing faster than AI is the number of AI experts. But if you look at the definition of the term AI, it's actually replicating human intelligence in machines. And if we think about this across four spheres, data, statistics, machine learning, and AI, um, in the real estate space, we kind of struggle with even the first step there, which is getting clean labeled data. Once you have clean labeled data, you can use statistics to create some amazing analytics insights, which allow you to make some decisions. That's only step 2. Step 3 is take that data to build predictions, and that's where machine learning comes in. And then step 4 is AI, which allows you to automate some of those decisions. And AI is kind of a ubiquitous term. It's an umbrella term. Everything from computer vision to robotics is kind of enveloped in there, including natural language processing. The trend that we are, of course, seeing in the marketplace right now, which has huge focus, is generative AI. And generative AI includes large language models, GPT models that we see in the marketplace, image generation tools, all of those things. So those are that's only a subset of AI, a subset of deep learning. And what's also interesting is that this is not a net new phenomenon. Machine learning AI was already here, and it's been here for a while. So if you think everything from Google Ads to Snapchat filters to things like credit card fraud detection, all rely on AI, and these are models that are already in place. This is a revolution that's been happening over the last several decades, and it finally feels like, at least for some of us who have been involved in this space, it feels like we're past that AI winter, we're into AI spring. There's a lot of potential that's coming to realization now. And we're seeing that reflected in the marketplace dialogue and all the activity that's happening in the marketplace. So if you look at just the last 3 weeks, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon announced that he believes that in the future we may only work 3.5-day work week, and we will live longer. And all of these things, thanks to AI, our work life will be very different. And if you look at this slide, there's a lot going on. This is just a snapshot of some of the investments that are happening in this space. There's tremendous impetus. There's tremendous change happening here. I won't go into all of this, but suffice it to say that almost every company on earth is investing heavily in the space of AI. And one of the big changes that we have seen in the last few weeks is around vision capabilities. And I just picked up a few use cases here for us to look at. So GPT-4 recently announced vision capabilities with their model. And essentially what I've done here, if you look at the top left example, I've uploaded a picture with a little bit of a broken HVAC pipe there. And I've asked a question, what's wrong here? How do I fix it? And lo and behold, GPT-4 gives you a full description on how to fix it. It's even figured out what size of pipe it is and all of those things. Amazing. And then, some of us are familiar, I'm sure, with this Cesal back to work barometer. And again, I've uploaded the picture and I asked GPT to figure out what the projected occupancy might be a year from now, and it's done that. It's pretty cool. It's figured out what the range might be. It's also done some analytics on top 10 metros. All of those things, amazing. And then, for interest to this audience, I also had uploaded very low resolution, poor quality floor plans, 3 of them, and I asked GPT to figure out what the differences are between those. And again, it's done that. So amazing, and it's given us some outputs there. So very high level use cases, but you could do a lot more with even basic freeware models that are out there. JLL has also built its own GPT model, JLL-GPT, which we are at the moment using internally, but very soon we'll have client applications also in that space. And if you just take a step back and think 12 months ago, none of this conversation was in the marketplace. We weren't really discussing any of this. All of this has happened in the last 12 months. Imagine what will happen in the next 12 months. And I love this example put out by Ali K. Miller on the metaverse, right? So 2021 image of Mark Zuckerberg out here on the left in the metaverse. And this is Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse in 2023. This is not a video. This is Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse in 2023. So incredible progress in the space of a very short time. So imagine what will happen with AI. And the gap between what is emerging and what is mature, that continues to shrink, and we're seeing this across all technology platforms. So that's kind of general introduction. What does this mean for businesses? What does this mean for the workplace? And what does it mean for real estate? Um, business obviously is transforming in a very big way thanks to technology, and we are seeing digital is taking firm foothold across the business, and that has implications on talent. Now you're able to support your talent anywhere, work on any app, work with any data, work anywhere, anytime. And that then has implications to real estate and what real estate stands for. And this is where we're seeing a sea change when it comes to real estate. The focus now increasingly is on supporting high quality, personalized experience in the workplace. And as the workplace gets used more and more dynamically, how do you change your support ecosystem, whether that's space or services, to be more dynamic as well going forward, be more liquid, be more agile? And this is the next wave of transformation that we're seeing in the workplace. I'll also touch on a couple of elements here in terms of workforce transformation, which are important themes for us to consider. Um, this is some research that came out of Accenture. The way it's being looked at is human-only activity is kind of easy to identify. The machine-only stuff is also easy to identify. The difficult parts are the middle zones where human AI needs to collaborate. That's where we have a number of use cases emerging, and we will see significant change and transformation. And there is, I would say, potential for a little bit of task automation, but that frees us up to do more better things and produce at a much higher level. Fantastic case study coming out of BCG and Harvard Wharton research here. So I won't go into the full detail on this slide here, but at a high level, this was 750 BCG consultants. The blue group on the left graph there did not use AI to do their executed tasks, real world consulting work. And then the green group used AI, but did not have any training on AI. And the red group had training on AI and used AI. So very interesting, because you see that the folks who use AI are significantly more productive, better quality outputs. You also see that the difference between folks who had training and did not have training, not much. So moral of the story here is use AI because it'll help you be more productive. You don't need to be an expert. The other couple of graphs on the right, the top one, again, very, very interesting. All the participants in the study, the 750 participants, were not equally skilled. So the folks who were lower skilled, the bottom half, actually improved more. So what this tells you again is that AI is going to be a leveling, we're going to create a level playing field for all of us. So fantastic result. And then just the last piece there is on tasks that are outside of the technology capabilities right now. The term that the study used was jagged technology frontier. Anything that's outside of that frontier, um, that's where you needed significant human judgment and human involvement to support outcomes. So, great case study tells you that AI can help you be more productive, free up time to do, bigger and better things, create a level playing field, and but use it with caution. So that's kind of on the workforce side. We are seeing tremendous potential coming out of that. Just the last couple of slides here in terms of how AI and the new technologies will impact real estate. Any new technology has impacted real estate over the years, right? So we had everything from shopping malls coming up a few years back to data centers, technology, and we adapt smart buildings. The real estate sector has adapted. This next wave of technology will be no different. Um, it's going to accelerate it. There'll be disruption. There's opportunity for innovation anytime there's disruption. There's opportunity to transform. There's opportunity to reinvest. There's opportunity to reinvent. And we are kind of lucky to be in this space at this moment because we have the tools now to execute our ideas. And we are seeing a lot of that happen across of the real estate space. So significant amount of use cases across the real estate industry. We are seeing things like automated property valuation, virtual touring, data and image processing. I showed you an example of a freeware there, but there's also other more specialized real estate systems that allow you to do that. The promised land of smart building and intelligent buildings is almost here. You have a lot of applications in that space. JLL's, for example, invested in some systems there. Predictive analytics, sustainability, these are areas where we are seeing innovation. As an example, JLL has invested in Hank AI, which allows us to kind of look at machine learning based control of HVAC systems to improve outcomes, sustainability outcomes for our clients. And there's, of course, the natural language processing implications, the large language model related implications for customer service, call centers, those kind of things in the real estate space as well. So we're seeing tremendous use case deployment across our real estate industry. And I'm happy to take questions on this topic as we go through this. Just as before I close out and hand over to Niknaz and Eric here, there is a lot of talk on technology, but one must firmly understand that technology can't be for technology's purpose. The future of work cannot be technology-led. It must be human-led. It must be driven by a purpose. But it can definitely be accelerated, augmented, enhanced with technology and our new friends in the AI space. So I'll pause there and happy to take questions as we go along.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation. So much information. So I personally have a couple of questions. So now we shift to Eric's presentation, and then to our audience, please feel free to post your questions in the chat box. And then at the end, we will do our best to address as many questions as we can.
Yes, while Niknaz is loading, I'll say thank you to Ram. That was a brilliant presentation and interesting to see the full suite of, wow, so many applications to catch up on. I know what I'm doing this weekend, but thank you. And you'll be relieved to know that I'm not an AI expert, so I'm not joining the fracas. I'm not sure that I'm expert on anything, but I do have some experience in disaster. And what am I doing here on an AI discussion? Well, hopefully that will be revealed. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, Eric. Can you click on the, did you click on the arrow down below
Yes.
the
Let's
screen?
try that.
You don't see it yet.
Share application window. How about now?
Okay, we can see it now. Perfect.
Perfect.
Awesome.
All right. So, like I said, so my background is in disaster, in post-disaster reconstruction. I trained as an architect and a construction manager. But got into humanitarian work while I was still a student, and then for many years was leading Architecture for Humanity's post-disaster program. Across the world, the model was basically the same. We look to create community-based rebuilding scenarios and develop local capacity, restore local culture, local well-being, this sort of thing. Yeah, it was an interesting time and left me with a lot of lessons. And we're going to be using those lessons to inform what we're talking about here. So we'll go through a thought experiment, talk about a few cracks in the dam, vulnerabilities in the value chain, go through the good news and the bad news, and then hopefully have some ideas about how to avert disaster. So after 2015, I retired from field work and I pivoted more into media work, advocacy, and teaching, first at WashU and then subsequently at Berkeley, and most recently at Harvard. And I don't know, I teach something relatively simple. I try and teach my students that disasters aren't natural. Disasters are, in fact, designed. And I don't mean in a conspiratorial way. I mean that we, the AEC value chain, developers, architects, engineers, create the conditions that make disaster inevitable. And as hokey as it sounds, I often use beavers as an example to illustrate how disasters actually happen. Beaver doesn't like fell a tree through brute force. It comes along and chews around the base of the tree until the structural integrity of the tree is actually eroded. Then a gust of wind comes along and does the work for it, which of course makes the beaver really happy. That's why he's bouncing around quite a bit. So if we think about this graphically, the wind is just there kind of doing its own thing. We can't control it. We don't influence it. We're not responsible for it. But the rate of chewing is constant, and therefore the structural integrity of the tree, the ability to resist, is actually declining continually. And where those two curves intersect, that's where we get to a disaster. And I codified this, and another thing that I typically teach my students is that there are hallmarks of a disaster. We can see a disaster coming in many cases. One is neglected infrastructure. Bridges and roads that should have been repaired but weren't. The emergence of patchwork solutions is usually a good clue. So when we start kind of making the bad infrastructure just a little bit bigger instead of doing what we really need to do, also a good clue. The widening or deepening of zone of vulnerability, that's, the city continues growing on top of a fault line. Widespread incredulity is a big one. So when the consensus is that a disaster can't possibly happen to us, that's usually a good sign. And then there's some triggering event. That's the earthquake or the hurricane or something like that. And we think of those things as disasters, and they're not really, they're just events. And it's that combined with all of the other stuff that actually makes for a disaster. In 2009, I was working on a very different kind of disaster, economic one. And this is probably how most architects became familiar with my work. But I was looking at the impact of the recession, the Great Recession, on architectural practice, and found a lot of data that pointed to the fact that architects were really at the bottom of the barrel in terms of the impact of the recession on their work. And that led me to question, like, how much society actually values architects or designs, given that they placed last out of all these professions. I wrote a book about it, which I understand a lot of people read. I'm not going to go into details, but basically the proposition was, hey, we had a disaster here. Like, there's nothing normal about this. Yes, a recession is a recession. Recessions happen. But there's no logic as to why architects would be so much more dramatically impacted than everybody else if we really believe that what they do is so valuable, and I do. If you want more information, there's a TED Talk on YouTube. Most of it still stands up, except for my facial hair decisions, which weren't great. So that led me into a thought experiment that was catalyzed by an invitation from Design Intelligence Quarterly to write a article, I guess back in February, and I wasn't invited to write on AI. It kind of evolved that way in my discussion with my editor there. And to me, I wanted to write about it because it had a lot of characteristics associated with disaster. I could read it AI through like a disaster lens. The neglected infrastructure of the profession, for instance, long licensing periods, low pay, precarious employment. Structurally speaking, design is not a healthy profession. Patchwork solutions like our haphazard adoption of technology, the fact that there's more and more architects, but AI is going to leave them less and less to do. The widespread incredulity. I think some of the dialogue is starting to catch up, but for a while there, it's pretty consistent that AI wasn't going to affect design. It was going to revolutionize medicine and law and everything else, but for some reason, design was this sacred art that could not be imitated or replicated by machines. And then there's a triggering event. And for me, the triggering event was natural language generative AI. As Ron pointed out, we've had AI and machine learning for decades, but to me, there was something catalytic about this particular development that was going to enable a bunch of other technologies and other developments that were going to dramatically affect design practice. I tried to map these out back in the spring, and it completely got away from me. And I bet a lot of people in the audience can relate to this. Every time you open up LinkedIn, there's like 4 new apps that you got to learn about and like what they do and this sort of thing. And AEC+tech actually like inventories those really well. So if you're just now joining us, please jump over to the website because Niknaz does a great job of keeping on top of this stuff. But it got me in a storytelling mood. And, I wanted to tell a story about what happens when we take all of those individual apps and we start automating different parts of the AEC cycle and most directly design practice, because that's just my home profession. So I asked GPT to help me write this story. And point of fact, it wrote the story. I just gave it characters, essentially. I gave it ideas about an architect and who that architect was and where they went to school and, essentially a personality profile. And I did the same with a client. Nothing sacred about any of this stuff. It's all kind of made up and arbitrary, but I felt part of the point was to give a lot of detail about who these people were in preparation for GPT writing a story. And then I gave it instructions, and I told it to hold a conversation with itself. Essentially, I was able to position 2 AIs opposite each other, and I gave them the instructions to interview one another. The architect interviewing a client and trying to understand what her goals and ambitions were for this house that she wanted to design, and a client interviewing an architect to see if that was the architect that she wanted to use on her house project. Most of my instruction was basically that. Keep asking questions of each other and interview each other quite the way that a human architect and a human client would interact. And the results were a bit unsettling.
Hilda told me a bit about your project, and I'm excited to learn more. Can you share your vision for it?
I'm looking to build a modern, sustainable home for myself and my 2 children. I want the design to have clean lines and be environmentally friendly. It's important for me to incorporate energy-efficient features and technology. I'd also like the house to feel warm and inviting, not too sterile.
That sounds like a wonderful vision.
So this goes on for about 20 minutes, and I had to eventually intervene and get the 2 AIs to actually stop talking with one another because they were robust at interviewing each other and drawing out more and more details about whatever this proposed project actually was. And subsequent to that, I carried on with the exercise. This became a full-blown research project as opposed to just an article. What you're looking at is a design brief. I asked GPT to generate a design brief out of the conversation, the transcript of the conversation that it had with itself. And it did so. And again, just like everybody else, started to see these emergent properties. For instance, the budget of $2.5 million felt right, but no idea where that came from or how that was calculated. The fact that it was a gentle slope with mature trees, I think, was extracted from the fact that the site was in the Berkeley Hills. The architects mentioned interesting smattering of kind of mid-century modern architects, all based on the fact that the client had a preference for modernism but didn't want it too sterile. That's the limit of instructions I gave it, and the rest was derived through GPT's conversation with itself. From that, it produced a visual description. So I wanted to see if we could actually make a visual of whatever this building was that these two GPTs were figuring out. And it ended up being very, very extensive, but that was useful in terms of putting it into Midjourney and allowing Midjourney to actually conjure
Well, my team and I have been working hard on some preliminary design concepts.
So I was able to have a part two.
We come up with 8 options that I'd like to present to you.
Get together and
please feel free to share your thoughts, likes and dislikes for each of them. This design features a central courtyard with all rooms arranged around it.
Yeah,
the living space opens up to the courtyard,
kind of
providing a seamless interaction experience.
I think was useful in terms of understanding maybe some of the long-term implications of this kind of technology. It worried me a lot, honestly. I don't practice as an architect, but a lot of my friends do. So I started to be concerned about this technology and its implications on practice, on employment, frankly, and like what architects are going to do. Coming from a disaster background, you know, I recognize that as a symbol, but I, much like Ron was saying, I mean, every kind of development presents an opportunity. So I saw the wonderful opportunities in it as well, and I think it needs to be carefully managed. By the way, everything I did in that exercise in March could now easily be done with GPT Vision. So it took a lot of legwork to kind of get images into GPT and Midjourney and back again and all this stuff, but done. The emergent properties continue to kind of roll out of it. So one of my favorites was the fact that GPT could produce a door and window schedule for this project that it had imagined with itself, and somehow knew that there should be one window in every bathroom, but no windows in the powder room. Again, like I don't know how that came to be or how that decision was made. It suggests to me that GPT had some sort of a spatial construct that it was operating off of, but it's a black box. I don't know. Budget also fairly detailed. You know, I ran it past a few contractors and it wasn't outside the realm of possibility. Their knowledge cutoff was in 2021, so that probably affected prices a little bit. But again, just an extraordinary capability coming out of this. I did not give GPT any information about how to be an architect or what necessarily to do. I gave it personality profiles and asked it to talk to it itself. And everything that you've just seen rolled out of that. After the article was out, I continue to write on these topics through my Substack. You're welcome to visit it, Life as a Disaster, where I talk about design and disaster and design futurism and things like that. Because it was an ongoing investigation and still ongoing, I guess, what the impact is actually going to be. I guess I took some time and I distilled it down to what I would see as 3 cracks in the dam, 3 points of vulnerability in architecture specifically, but AEC professions generally. And we'll pick on architects and contractors. One, I think, is the troubled relationship that we've always had with new technology. And there's this particular quirk in architecture where we celebrate innovators as they innovate within our own profession, even though what they're innovating is old hat to the rest of the world. So we celebrate Corbusier and the other modernists because, you know, they celebrated concrete and this new material, even though reinforced concrete was actually invented before the Civil War. In fact, there were a whole bunch of things invented in between reinforced concrete and the rise of modernism. About 75 years elapsed between the invention of concrete, reinforced concrete, and the domino house, which might be considered the start of modernism. And we do the same thing in the modern age. You know, this building lit the world on fire and had a lot to do with why I became an architect, actually. It's such a cool idea and so many cool possibilities to do with buildings. But again, a rather old technology when considered globally. CAD/CAM manufacturing was pioneered by the aerospace industry in the 60s to improve airline performance. And we see a similar sort of timeline, you know, between the Wright brothers inventing air travel. There was only about 60 years or so before McDonnell Douglas started implementing CAD/CAM in the production of their planes, and the auto industry followed almost immediately thereafter. And it was 10 years after that when architects even started writing about the possibility of this. And then 30 years after that we started doing it with buildings. So I think we need to acknowledge this historical quirk and vulnerability that the design industries have, where we pick up a technology 30 years after everybody has mainstreamed it, integrate it into what we're doing, and then celebrate that as technological progress. This one's for the contractors. We resist productivity gains. And if you're a contractor, you know this. Construction is one of the only industries that has not gained any productivity in the last 40 years. The entire digital revolution essentially passed it by. And it lives down there with extraction and, sorry to say, real estate in terms of how productive industries are getting as a result of new technology. And this probably has a lot to do with digitization. So construction also ranks, second to last in terms of its degree of adoption for digital technology. And we know where that goes, right? Because Uber taught us the ultimate lesson. In New York, they had this medallion system, which was protected, and actually for almost 100 years, the number of medallions per person declined, but that was good if you owned a medallion, right? Because the value of medallions kept increasing and increasing, such that the total value of all medallions was over $10 billion at one point. So this was a very valuable enterprise. It was made valuable by constraining the number of medallions and basically making New Yorkers' lives miserable. And a lot of technology came along, and whoever was in charge of that stuff didn't really see fit to bring any of this stuff into that industry because they had a protected closed market. Much like architects and designers, we're protected by licensure. So there's, I think, less incentive to actually adapt and modernize with technology. And we know what happened, right? Uber comes along and shoots up to a $90 billion valuation in less than a decade. And, this is not an apples to apples comparison because the medallion numbers are just for New York and Uber is global. But I think everybody can see what I'm getting at. When innovations come along and we don't incorporate them and we don't adapt to them, that makes us vulnerable to predation. That inspires others to say, look, maybe there's an entirely better way to do this using this new technology. And the third is our value proposition is suspect. I know that's subjective, but I think there's a lot of evidence out there that valuation of architecture has been problematic, and we don't always know how to speak to the value that good design actually creates. Value isn't hard to figure out, right? You have something that is worth something, and then you have a certain cost to it, and the delta between that is actually the value. In this case, the difference between $15 of worth and $10 of cost. And we can run scenarios with AI alone and human with AI to understand different valuations of those different activities. And Ram, I thought your evidence on that was great in terms of how productive consultants can be. I think the other thing to be aware of is that AI does not have to be better than human to displace humans. From an employment perspective, it has to create more value, and it can do that by creating something that's 80% as good and 10% of the cost. So yeah, against a historical landscape, I've been worried. So let's talk about the value chain itself. I think there's good news and there's bad news with this AI stuff. I think AI is going to inherently increase value, right? When you look at a value chain diagram, it's usually presented this way. I prefer my way, no surprise. That you have all these tasks, right? And they have a certain cost associated with them to produce. And then you have a certain worth that is being assessed by the buyer or whoever is procuring the service. And from that, we get a certain amount of value. AI is going to inherently increase that value if for no other reason than bringing costs down. So as we build value along the entire value chain, we contemplate, the intrusion of AI, bringing those costs down, and then subsequently increasing the value merely by virtue of those lowered costs. So it becomes very easy to envision a different kind of value chain that is building more value over time through the intrusion of this technology. Given the way that CEOs and everybody is buzzing about this, and the degree that people are investing in it, I think people generally get that, and there's not a lot of dispute on that at this point. So how does that look across like an AE cycle? Similar sort of thing. You got worth, you got cost, that projects value. Don't pay attention to these numbers; they're sort of randomized, and that builds value over time. And AI, because it has lower costs and faster schedules, does the same. So we get this kind of new value equation that I think is fundamentally good for all of us. The catch is that it creates opportunities for blurring professional boundaries, I think, that are still underestimated to some degree. So if we're looking at something like this, where we have a different value at each stage of the chain because of the different perceptions of worth and cost, and these are not my perceptions, by the way, they're largely arbitrary. We're very used to seeing this value chain, developer, designer, architect, engineer, builder, etc. I think with the technology, it's going to create opportunities for people to get entrepreneurial about what they can and cannot do and don't want to do, and create poaching scenarios, essentially. So if the architect wants to get involved in site selection, something that might ordinarily be done by a developer or owner, but they can make a value proposition that, like, look, hey, we would be really good at this because it allows us to weave that into our design process. We know the city really well. We know the built environment really well. We're going to do that. And through technology, they find a way to lower the cost, maybe add a little bit more worth. Well, then they have a different value proposition, right? They have an enhanced value proposition that proves the value of the overall cycle. Builders could do the same thing with construction documents, right? I mean, construction documents are still a bizarre process. It's been 25 years. I can't wrap my head around it. We overdraw details in the hopes that we won't get RFIs. The contractor sends RFIs because they're trying to juice the client for more money. We have to answer them, which then juices the client for more money. Either way, the client loses. That's a terrible operation, right? So maybe the contractor makes the claim that, they should just do the construction documents. It's the less interesting part of architecture for architects, and it's completely overblown. So we can kind of bring down all of the costs and actually create additional worth as a result of that. So that raises the possibility that we may be looking at different value chains in the future, and the professional responsibilities that have historically divided architects, engineers, builders, owners may start to dissolve or be in play. I think it just depends on who is adopting to technology the fastest, and therefore who can create more additional value the fastest. But I would not be surprised if we start to see a blurring of those kind of boundaries. AI is also going to inherently increase productivity, but there's also a catch. So we're used to seeing a project cycle like this, and the core problem is that AI is going to increase productivity, speed things up, but not do so evenly across the entire value chain. So you may have a 30% improvement in construction, but only a 50% improvement in design. It just depends on how things are being integrated. I think that construction will adopt less and speed up less just because of the nature of it, the physical nature of it. But fundamentally, like, different parts of the chain are going to innovate in different ways. When you start stacking these up, you say, okay, well, what are the implications? It's immediately apparent that we've got these gaps now all of a sudden. And that's people being unemployed, right? So we can't have that. We got to deal with that. And the intuitive way to deal with it is actually to just, move stuff around, right? We accelerate the schedule in one direction or another, or we create a gap like the one you see, and we say, okay, well, we're just going to take on additional work. That sounds great because we can take on that additional work and we can actually just start moving these different pieces into the little gaps. So now people are busy, they're doing more work, they're making more money. Sounds like a happy ending. The problem is this and this. So the AEC cycle is constrained on one side by the money supply and the other side by the demand for buildings. The demand for buildings is generated by inflation, population growth, interest rates, etc. It doesn't have any intrinsic relationship with the productivity of the AEC sector. So if all of these things create the demand for design buildings, you ask what the relationship is between that and how fast an architect can get a project done, or how fast a contractor can get a project done. And you don't find much of a relationship. In fact, it's sandwiched in there pretty good. Another way to think about it is that if we suddenly possess the technology to design and build buildings 10 times faster, it's not like people would need 10 times as many buildings. It doesn't work that way. So I think this increased productivity is a bit of a devil's bargain. It's going to create some employment problems unless we figure out what to do. So how do we figure out what to do? Well, first we acknowledge that, as the capabilities of AI increase, the delta between what we're doing and what's possible gets larger and larger. And that's the value of disruption. That's what brings people to the table to say, look, there's a completely different way to do this, and I want it. If you remember this graph about Uber and the valuation relative to taxis, this is that same graph relative to the global construction market. That blue line at the bottom is the $90 billion valuation of Uber. The orange line is the value of the total global construction market on its way to $14 trillion by 2030. That's a hell of an incentive. So I told myself I'd leave at 11:50 or finish at 11:50. But quickly, my window into this, my process is basically to start with external assumptions and internal assumptions and hold the external assumptions constant and investigate my own internal assumptions about what works. And then do like a true false analysis. So we can say, like, if we're still going to need physical spaces and the assumption that architects design buildings is true, then architects will design physical spaces. If it's false, then architects will need to find something else to do. I use this sort of analysis in a lot of my work. And then I use those second order assumptions to generate third and fourth order assumptions to get to some kind of plausible future about what we're actually going to be doing. In this case, designing metaversal spaces, potentially designing the linkages between metaversal and physical spaces. So my advice to everyone out there and to us collectively as an industry is to make a breakdown of all these assumptions, understand which are more plausible than others, and then do an if this, then that. And I think what would be interesting to explore is basically how this changes the eventual project cycle and the divisions within it. All right, 1 minute over. Thank you so much for your time and involvement.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eric. You're such a great professor. Your students are so lucky to have you. It's like you're inherently a professor.
Tell them
so
that.
good. You like teaching things up. Wonderful, beautiful presentation. So many fabulous points. So I have a question for both of you. So for all the AC practicing professionals and real estate professionals who are in the audience, and on the other side, AC technology innovators. So on the practicing side, what can they do, let's say, from today, if they want to start to catch up? So what do you think is the easiest and fastest way to start to catch up? So I know that many of my architect friends, they leave the profession, they just go do something else, or they either get too scared. All you both presented is so exciting, but at the same time so scary. So for someone in the practicing side, if they want to start catching up and learning how to really not to fall behind, what is the best way? What are some practical steps to do? And for all these technology innovators, we know that, I think, I don't have the exact number, but less than 10% of AI startups make it. So, 90% they fail. So, what can they do to succeed in the building industry? So, maybe Ram, do you mind going first?
Yeah, no problem, Niknaz, and great question. We get this from all of our clients. Anytime we present information on AI and everything that's happening, the first question is, hey, there's a lot. This is overwhelming. Where do I begin, right? And the cool part with this technology is that it's accessible, and the interface now is natural language. You can just talk to it. You can type in content, and you get outputs. And the best way, really, honestly, to understand these technologies is to use them. Eric demonstrated so many amazing use cases. A lot of those can be developed very, very quickly. And even from the time that Eric's developed that presentation to the technology that it stands right now, a few weeks, I don't know, Eric, was a few months back, but the technology has progressed even there. So I wouldn't, for anyone who's interested in looking at these spaces of learning, go experiment with these tools, use them, understand how they work. I think that's good enough as a starting point. And then from there, if you have an idea for an app, if you have an idea for a website, you have an idea for something that you want to write, you want to publish a book like I'm attempting to do. All of these tools are accelerators in that space, right? So, for example, you could go from idea to app in a few hours now. That's the power of these technologies. And just experiment, learn as you go. These things will keep changing and evolving. and follow some of the smart people. I mean, there are so many folks on these social platforms now that experiment and show use cases. Follow all of them.
Yeah, I would second that, and reassure people that everybody's falling behind. Like we're all falling behind. It's very, very difficult to keep up with everything that's happening. Ram, you're quite right. That the video I made was made in March, and if I was doing it today, it'd take 5 minutes. And it's extraordinary how fast things are moving. So, I mean, the advice that I would give is get comfortable with uncertainty, one, and design your life. I think one of the mistakes architects always make is feeling like design is something that has to be applied to their work instead of their work and everything else. So design whatever you think an architect is going to be doing in 10 years. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that, but that will give you a waypoint to say, okay, well, I need to start building towards this. I can tell you this, you're not going to be doing the same thing you're doing now in 10 years. So start giving it some thought about like what you think your profession is going to be, what you're going to do, what you want to do, what you're passionate about. Use some future analysis and some methodology and work backward from there. That's what I would do.
And by the way, just to share a little bit more, I was asked this morning that where do we go to learn about this topic? Is there a resource available? So I actually went to Perplexity AI. It's a free AI platform. And I said to Perplexity AI, design me a curriculum. I work in the real estate industry. I want to learn about AI. Design a curriculum for me. And Perplexity AI came back with a curriculum of free resources, 18 of them, where you could go and learn about AI. And the total course timeline that it designed was 4 hours. So
Wow.
AI can come to the rescue there as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're almost out of time. So I just have one more quick question. So what is really the biggest obstacle that in your experience, you have such extensive experience in this AEC space. So what is the biggest adaptation, challenge, and obstacle that you've seen and you've experienced? If you can share with us, maybe in like a minute, each of you. Ram, if you don't mind going first, and then Eric.
Yeah, I think Eric touched on a lot of them through his presentation. I think it's ultimately it boils down to mindset and adaptability. I think those are the two key elements. Going forward, it's not IQ; it's probably AQ, adaptability quotient. And the higher your AQ is, the more successful you will be.
Yeah, perfectly agree. I was going to say cultural, but I think that would be the same thing as what Ron just said. I mean, I think that in the tech world, there's a culture of, hey, let's do this thing. If it falls apart 3 weeks from now, we'll just do another thing. And I think the AEC chain is just wired differently. And perhaps in the past, there was legitimate reasons for that, but I don't think it can sustain into the future. So get real adaptable.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you so much. You both are such fabulous speakers. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately, we have to wrap up. Thanks again. Thanks to our amazing audience that were with us today. So hope to see you at our next event, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Ron.
all. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.